Okay, so I want to talk about light. So in photography, light is your most important element. And so here's a quote: "Light makes photography. Embrace light, admire it, love it, but above all, know light. Know it for all you're worth, and you will know the key to photography." And that's George Eastman, the founder of Kodak. So light is one of the most important aspects of photography, and so understanding it is even more important. And so we can evaluate light in photography and kind of break it into three essential categories. And we're going to call these categories quality, direction, and quantity. Okay, so understanding these three things will help you create better images. Okay, so quality of light. So the first part is quality of light. So that's going to be called the type of light. Okay, and so we'll break these down into three more types of light. Okay, and so the first one is going to be direct natural light. So this is unfiltered, unblocked sunlight. It's harsh, it produces strong shadows and strong contrast. Okay, so if you were to go outside in the middle of Fresno, in the middle of summer, in the middle of the day, that is direct natural light. It casts hard shadows, hard contrast, and so these can be used to your advantage. Understanding what this light is, it can be good for backlighting a subject. So basically, if you were to have the sun behind someone, cast a backlight, kind of glows around them, the light glows. It's great for emphasizing texture. So if you were to look in the side of a stuccoed house, the texture in the middle of the day is really nice. So direct natural light is really good for these things. The next type of light is diffuse natural light. And so diffuse natural light is anytime light is passing through something that scatters the light. So this can be fog, clouds, mist, rain. Anytime you kind of have this soft, diffuse light outside. So this is going to reduce contrast. It makes everything look kind of softer. That gives you kind of more of a calming, peaceful feeling. You can also get this effect through window light. So window light sometimes creates good diffuse light, and this would be great for portraits. Window light is really good if you want to create kind of a soft portrait. So that is going to be diffuse natural light. So anytime you're looking maybe in the fog, cloud, mist, rain. So Fresno in the winter has really nice diffuse light. So fog, I know Fresno early spring gets really nice fog in the morning. That's a really soft light and it creates great images. And the last one is artificial light. So anytime you use any external source of light that is not the sun, this is called artificial light. Okay, so in photography, there are certain artificial lights that are meant for taking photographs with, and that's going to be like a flash, what's called a bare bulb fixture, or a photo studio setup. Anytime you see like a studio photography, it's going to have all these lights on stands. Those are all artificial lighting, and they can be used to light any source where there is no light. Okay, it can also be used to create what's called fill light. So if you're taking a photograph and there's not really enough light to completely fill your subject, you can use an artificial light to help fill in any dark areas, and that would be called a fill light. There also are different things you can add to your light to diffuse it. You can bounce artificial light, so you can diffuse it using things like an umbrella. So any of these equipments, you see photographers use them all the time to kind of manipulate artificial light to get a certain style that they want. All right, so I want to show you some examples. So this is an example of direct natural light. And so if you look at this photo, you can see that there are strong shadows. Okay, so strong contrast from shadow to regular light. And so it has a really, really harsh look to it. Okay, the whites are kind of harsh. The image looks kind of harsh. The edges of the contrast are really sharp. So this creates a really strong direct natural light look. So I want to move on. So this is what you would consider diffuse natural light. So it's shadow. So you can kind of see, you can't really tell any of the shadows of any of the elements in the photograph. There's really no shadows, no contrast really going on in the image that's made by the shadows. So it's kind of an even kind of an even exposure throughout. And so it kind of gives more of a soft, calming feel to the image, as opposed to up here, you have that really harsh contrast and gives kind of a harsher effect to the photograph. So these are kind of two main differences between direct natural light and diffused natural light. All right. So if we were to kind of break down the lights to how they kind of give different effects to the photograph. So these are two portraits. I want you to kind of see the difference between. On the left, this portrait has a very harsh, direct natural light. You can see the shadows are really harsh. The shadow on the face kind of cups the side of the face, is really sharp. And then on the right, we have more diffused light. Okay, so there's not really any contrast in the face. Even on the ground, the shadows are really faint. And so they give different effects to these images. The image on the light feels kind of more dramatic, a little bit more epic in terms of the person, because they're kind of cast in the shadow. And then on the right, you have kind of a softer, more calming photograph, and kind of see that from the subject as well. All right, so same thing. So here are a couple shots of a building downtown, and so they're taken. One's taken during the middle of the day, and then one's going to be taken kind of in the middle of winter, kind of more of an overcast day. And you can really see the difference in terms of how the photograph looks. And so if I wanted to get this effect where I want the barbed wire to be kind of dark and gloomy, if I want it to seem kind of more intimidating, which photograph would do that better? So if you look down to kind of the overcast day, it kind of gives more of an effect of gloom, having the overcast diffused light. The bright, harsh light kind of gives more of an uplifting view in this photograph. So these are things how you can kind of think about light changing how you see or interpret a photograph as well. All right, so the next aspect of light is going to be direction. Okay, and so direction, just like the name implies, is from which angle you are lighting up your subject with your light. Okay, and so every time you change the angle, it's going to have kind of a different effect on how you see the image. Okay, so here is kind of an example. This Jim Morrison figurine, it's lit up in different areas. So first off, we have front lighting. Okay, so lighting is coming directly towards the subject. So if you were to hit them with just like an on-camera flash directly towards your subject, okay, and then we have kind of more of an up flash or up lighting for the second one. So you're kind of hitting, so if this was like more higher on your flash, coming down a little bit, you can see the shadow of the arms kind of hitting the stomach more, okay, and that's one thing you can kind of get an understanding of where the light is coming from, is look at where your shadows are going. Okay, and so we can get a little bit higher. You see the shadows dropping a little bit more, so the light must be coming from a little bit higher up. Okay, you can also start to see shadows on the side of the face. Okay, so that means the light must be coming at an angle too. Okay, so here you have kind of a sharper angle. You have almost half the light. You get a little bit of light on the eye, okay? You get more side of the body, so we must be coming at almost side. And then down here, we have kind of direct side, right? We have half the face lit up. We have one whole arm lit up. The other is kind of cast in shadow. So we're coming at probably directly from the side here, so side lighting. So here it looks like, because we have the shadow of the hands on the face, probably coming up, so they're shooting a light up at the person. A good example of this would be like Frankenstein's monster. It kind of adds a really dramatic effect whenever you light a subject from the bottom. And then finally we have backlighting, like I was talking about earlier, so the light's coming from behind. The subject is completely cast in shadow, and then the light kind of glows behind, kind of creating a silhouette of the subject. So these are all ways you can kind of give different effects by different lighting directions. So front lighting kind of flattens your image, and you can see that from the top. So when you light someone directly from the front, you don't get as many of the shadows in the face that kind of pop the face out more, as opposed to over here where you have kind of more of an angle lighting. You give kind of contrast in the face, kind of helps the face pop out in the image more, kind of adds more drama to the image. It also kind of adds texture to the face and to the body. That kind of helps pull the image, makes it more interesting. All right, so here are two portraits done by Timothy Greenfield Sanders, who's a famous portrait photographer, and you can see kind of the difference in how he lit the subjects. So over here, you have kind of half the face is in shadow. You have a very dramatic looking image, subject smoking, has a serious face, look on their face, light's probably coming from this direction. And creates a very serious, dramatic feel to this image. Whereas over here, we have almost more, still at an angle because you have kind of a little bit of shadow on the side of the face, but you have more of a direct lighting setup. It has kind of a softer feel to the image, not as dramatic. The look on the face makes it feel softer because it's not lit up in this kind of harsh way. So different lighting directions can change the way that people interpret either the subject in your image or the image itself. So here's kind of a breakdown of some of the different lighting situations you can set up. So we have our subject here in the middle. So front lighting, the light comes directly in front of the subject. Then we have 45 degree. That's going to create kind of a side effect. Kind of where you would get something like this. It's kind of coming from an angle. And then we have side lighting, rim lighting coming from behind a little bit, lighting up a little bit of the face or the back of the face. Backlighting creates kind of a silhouette, and then the same on the other way around. So finally, we're talking about the last element of light, and that is quantity, and that's simply the amount of light that is in your scene, and this can be changed by not only your settings, your camera settings, so it's just basically understanding your shutter speed, your ISO, and your aperture. So all those affect how much light is allowed into your camera, and so that kind of changes how much light is going on in your scene. And so direct sunlight is obviously going to have a lot of light, and so you are able to light your scene more. Indoor lighting is not going to have as much light. You're going to really need to either add artificial lighting to it or directly change some of the settings in your camera. So looking at your shutter speed and your aperture and your ISO. Finally, you want to look at a couple different ways to account for lighting outside is something called the Sunny 16 rule. So the Sunny 16 rule essentially is if you were to go outside on a sunny day, you could set your camera to an ISO of 100, a shutter speed of 1/100th of a second, and then set your aperture to f16. On a sunny day, that is going to give you a good exposure or a correct exposure. And from those settings, you can account for any other situation as well. So if you were to change if it was kind of an overcast day, you know, a 1/100th of a second, a ISO 100, f16 gives you a nice day. You can bump your aperture either up or down a stop and then account for the other settings as well. So Sunny 16 is a good rule to have if you want to go outside. You want to kind of change your exposure settings really quickly, or you don't want to have to change your exposure settings too often. You could set the Sunny 16 rule, take your photographs, and odds are you'll get a pretty good exposure. All right.